The news that exploded on the internet today. The United States has lifted sanctions from the national carrier of Belarus, Belavia. This was officially announced by John Kool, a representative of the American president, who arrived in Minsk today, September 11, and met there with the Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko. Kool clarified that the decision was approved by all United States ministries and agencies by order of the head of the White House, Donald Trump, to do this immediately. In addition, Trump gave Lukashenko a letter in which he said he was praying for the dictator's health and also gave him cufflinks with the White House insignia. In return, Lukashenko agreed to release 52 political prisoners, and on September 11 they safely crossed the Lithuanian border. That's what the president of Lithuania, Gitanas Nausėda, said. He thanked the United States and President Trump personally, but noted that more than 1,000 opponents of the Lukashenko regime still remain in Belarusian prisons. But interestingly, Washington has already stated that this is only the beginning of improving relations between the United States and Belarus. Well, that's why experts are already speculating that Trump is trying to pull Belarus away from Moscow. And Lukashenko, who throughout his time in power has always shifted between the West and Russia, agreed to a yet undisclosed deal with the United States of America. And in this episode, we'll discuss what that deal might look like. My name is Alexei Pechi. Today is September 11th, according to the calendar. And before we start this episode, I want to remind you that every day, several news analysis segments are released on this YouTube channel, so that you stay up to date with absolutely all the news. That's why I recommend subscribing to this YouTube channel and ask you to like this episode. So, on Thursday, September 11, an American delegation led by the representative of the United States President John Kool arrived in the capital of Belarus, Minsk. During the meeting, he announced that the United States had lifted sanctions from the Belarusian airline Belavia. At the meeting with the self-proclaimed president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, Kool stated that the head of the White House had ordered the sanctions on the Belarusian airline to be lifted immediately. And now I will quote Kool. "I want to state absolutely officially here and now that we have lifted the sanctions on Belavia. This is official. I had a meeting with President Trump, which was attended by several dozen other people. This decision was made by the president, who said to do it immediately." Well, and President Trump's representative further added that this decision has already been made and approved by all the relevant United States ministries and agencies involved in this work. These include the United States State Department, Commerce Department, Treasury Department, and others. Kool said the United States wants to normalize relations with Belarus, and according to him, supposedly still on the way to Alaska. In August, before meeting with Putin from aboard his plane, United States President Donald Trump had an important phone conversation with Alexander Lukashenko. And so, Trump's representative noted that it was a very good and productive conversation, after which the head of the White House instructed him to call Lukashenko again, which he did. Well, here's an interesting point. Kool added that lifting sanctions from the airline Belavia is just the beginning. Quote, "If we come to the right decisions during our discussion, during our meeting, as for the other people who are being held, meaning the prisoners, I think we can achieve a lot on the path to normalizing our relations." Well, and after the meeting, official information appeared that Belarus pardoned 52 prisoners and released them, handing them over to Lithuania. Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda reported this. Here's a quote from Nausėda. Quote, "Not one is forgotten. Today, 52 prisoners safely crossed the Lithuanian border from Belarus, leaving behind barbed wire, bars on the windows, and constant fear. I am personally deeply grateful to the United States and Trump. 52 is a lot, a whole lot. Nevertheless, more than 1,000 political prisoners still remain in Belarusian prisons, and we cannot stop until they are set free." Quote, "Lukashenko announced that among those released by Belarus at the request of the United States president were 14 foreign citizens. Among those released were 6 citizens of Lithuania, 2 citizens of Latvia, 2 citizens of Poland, 2 citizens of Germany, and 1 citizen each from France and the United Kingdom. Apparently the rest are Belarusians." Belarus also reported that Kool delivered a letter from Trump and the First Lady of the United States, Melania Trump, in which they wished Lukashenko all the best and presented him with a commandment as a gift. Now I'll go on to quote Lukashenko. As cliched as it may sound, I want to thank President Trump. Not because I want to flatter him, I'm not like that, but for the efforts he is making to achieve peace, especially in our region. Naturally, the Russians quickly got involved. And so the Russian news agency Telegraph Agency of the Soviet Union reported that 52 people were pardoned on humanitarian grounds and as a gesture of goodwill at the request of Trump and other world leaders. Vesna, the human rights group, reports that Nikolai Statkevich is among those released. He is a former presidential candidate of Belarus and a political prisoner detained in 2020 and sentenced to 14 years in a high-security penal colony. And by the way, nothing had been known about his condition since February 9, 2023. Some interesting details emerge here. Trump and Lukashenko really did have a phone call on August 15 before the White House chiefs meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska. The American leader then stated that he was negotiating for the release of another 1,300 prisoners. Many of them were arrested during the crackdown on mass protests after the 2020 elections in Belarus. And in one of his subsequent posts on the social network Truth Social, Trump repeated this number and praised Lukashenko, hinting that he expects corresponding actions from him. The Belarusian dictator confirmed the fact that a deal was discussed, which would involve easing sanctions in exchange for the release of political prisoners. By the way, this characterizes any dictatorial regime in general, for which human life means absolutely nothing. Can you even imagine that? Or the modern world, where the release of political prisoners is bargained for in exchange for lifting sanctions. So, the first restriction against Belavia, let me remind you, was introduced by the United States Department of Commerce back on April 8, 2022, banning the use of American aircraft for flights to Belarus itself and to Russia because of the invasion of Ukraine. Since the Belarusian carrier ignored this, in June of the same year, the agency banned companies around the world from repairing or otherwise using American spare parts or equipment to service Belavia's fleet. And on August 9, 2023, the sanctions became total. There are now concerns that, of course, Russia will use Belavia to bypass its own sanctions. But Lukashenko, during his time in power, has repeatedly swung between the European Union and Russia. Sometimes he was friendly with Europe, sometimes with the Russians, sometimes he criticized one side, sometimes the other. Others insist that in this way, Trump is trying to find a loophole to continue his dialogue with Putin, but now through an intermediary like Lukashenko. Some say the United States is now set on pulling Minsk away from Moscow, or at the very least to prevent the territory of Belarus from being used for a new Russian attack on European countries. But what do you think? Why is Trump seeking such a rapprochement with the dictator Lukashenko? Write your thoughts in the comments under this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care, goodbye.